Maybe we start, I know a lot of people will probably be familiar with it, but maybe start with a quick introduction of what Informatica is and what it does.
So Informatica is a data platform company. We build a data platform that enables our customers to manage their data. So what do I mean by managing the data? Let's say that you need to do analytics, and for that you may build a data lake, or you might end up building a data warehouse. And for that, that's a data management problem. Let's say you acquired another company and you need to merge the customer list because maybe you need to upsell or cross-sell to those customers. Again, you need to bring the customer data together. That's a data management problem. Potentially, you could be, say, modernizing your application infrastructure to moving from on-premise to cloud. You need to take all of your data and then migrate that to the cloud.
Okay.
That's another data management problem. So we provide a platform for doing all of this data management. And 20 years back, we were a startup company that came out of Silicon Valley. And last year, we crossed $1 billion in revenue.
Wow. So I have a question. I mean, you said it yourself. Informatica has obviously been around, way before Spark, way before Hadoop. You've probably seen a lot of these technologies come and go. So what is it about Spark that's caught your attention? What's the motivation behind you guys taking a lot more interest in investing in it?
So I think as you nailed it, right? We've been doing data well before data became sexy or fashionable. And I think once Hadoop came along, we realized that anytime you talk to anybody who's using Hadoop, maybe about 80% of the time they spent preparing the data. They essentially end up doing a hand coding of ETL. So we realized that we had actually solved the problem in a different domain, maybe when people were building warehouses. So we thought it was very natural for us to take our capability and then enable our users to use Hadoop and also build some of those best practices of data management to the Hadoop. So that's why we got into Hadoop. Now, to your second part of the question, so why Spark? So if you, again, I'm not sure, most of you are probably 3GL developers, but Informatica provides essentially what we call a visual DSL. It's a domain-specific language for doing your mapping. And once you sort of defined it using a tooling, so you don't need to be a developer. You can be a 4GL, what we call a 4GL developer. Once you develop that, then you can run it in different runtimes. You can push it down. So it's an abstraction layer, essentially. And you can push it down to Hadoop. You can push it down to an SMP engine that we provide. Or you can push it to an agent that sits on your desktop. So when we looked at that, our initial focus was actually to map that to MapReduce. And we all know it was very challenging because MapReduce is a very limited programming model. When we looked at Spark, Spark actually has all the operators that we had in our higher level abstraction. So it was very easy for us to map to Spark. So I think that was one of the sort of main attractions to Spark. All of you guys are here because you know the performance advantages. So sort of beyond all of that, it was very attractive to us. I think there's beyond sort of pushing to Spark itself, everybody sort of talks about, or everybody has this notion that there'll be one engine to rule them all, right? People think there's one database to rule them all, one engine to rule them all, and most of the time it's actually fantasy. I do think that Spark actually has the opportunity to get there in terms of having a single engine to do things like your data preparation, single engine to do analytics. And once you have a single engine, actually opens up a lot of possibilities. For example, you can do optimization that goes all the way from your analytical predicates that are in your analytics can go all the way to your source. So I think that's the opportunity that's there. And the fact that it's very versatile, I think that's also very appealing to us because we are using this extensively. Not only are we allowing our customers to use Spark, we also are using it internally in our projects. I think I'll give you one example of how we're using Spark. So if you look at Spark SQL today, right, it allows you to do analytics. But if you want to do data exploration, which is on unstructured data, then you need to go to things like Elasticsearch, which is really about exploring data using search-based interface. We are trying to bring that together by extending Spark SQL and adding things like a Lucene-like construct to do the search on the text data itself. So reason why we find it appealing is, first of all, it allows our customers to leverage the Spark, right, and get all the performance benefits, and also it allows us to build new kinds of products as well.
Interesting. So I mean, fairly strong praise for Spark, but I also like to always ask the flip side. What are the challenges or the gaps that you see kind of to Spark becoming more fully adopted that it needs to continue to work on, say, over the next 6 to 12 months?
I think the challenges would be, we work with companies across the whole globe, and one of the biggest challenges that I see is that you have the challenge of skill set, right? Once you get out of this reality distortion zone, which is Silicon Valley, it's very hard to actually figure out that there are not enough Spark developers or enough Python developers who can actually hand code these data pipelines using Spark.
Yeah.
So I think that's where bringing tools like ours and others who can actually give you a higher level of abstraction, so the ramp up is easier. I think that's key to Spark adoption. And I think once we have that, and I'm quite encouraged by the attendance that you have here, but I do think that I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Got it. Okay. So there was actually, earlier this morning we heard, I think, Mike Olson draw a picture and say, okay, HDFS and HBase, most of the data is going to land there, and then you can use any of the processing engines. I think we heard Doug Wolf from the CI say he sees more and more a world where data is distributed. You guys obviously deal with a lot of data and data movement. Is this concept of most of the data being landed in a single data lake, is that what you're seeing, or are you seeing things differently?
So we're actually seeing data lake emerging as a concept, right? By the way, some people don't like the term data lake because they think it's an act of nature, and that has that negative connotation.
It's just got to be a water analogy,
so
lake, swamp, reservoir, something.
Yeah, they like to call it reservoir. So we are seeing some of that. People are actually bringing data into Hadoop or HDFS, and then ideas that you'll unleash your business analysts to make use of that data. But I think that I want to put a couple of caveats in there, right? IT still, people assume that now IT is out of picture and data warehouse is out of picture once you have a data lake, but that's not the case. IT still would like to actually have some governance in terms of what goes into the lake. We have customers who are they're building data lakes, but before they bring any data into the lake, they want to make sure that all the PII, that's the personally identified information like credit card or social security number, they're all masked before they put it there. They're also very worried about provisioning the data so that the right entitlements are there, in the sense the right person is allowed to use that. So I think that's the other thing that we are seeing. And one of the challenges with data lake, as I see it, is you can put all the data in there, but one of the biggest challenges is you don't have enough metadata. And if you really want to unleash business users on that, I think unless you have the business context around the data, it's very hard to make use of that data. So I think data lakes are coming, but I do think that some of the tooling has to catch up and all the metadata has to catch up in order to really make use of it.
Got it. And so what about the cloud, right? I mean, I think we just had Matt Wood from Amazon talk about it. There's the notion of we're going, a lot of people say organizations, we're going to the cloud. Then there's other organizations say a lot of the data exists on-premise. And everybody's answer to that just seems to be the kind of, what I semi-say is a cop-out, the world will be hybrid, right? So what do you see happening, especially as you guys are dealing with a lot of the movement of data?
So I think cloud applications are here to stay, and in fact, they're only going to accelerate. But if you look at what's happening, most of the applications in the cloud are what we call edge applications, things like CRM or human capital management or maybe some SFA. These are the applications that are going there. But even to this date, most of the ERP applications are still on-premise. So you will actually have a situation where you have some of the data sitting in on-premise, some of the data sitting in cloud. So you do have this dichotomy. And so you need to have your data management that can actually bridge between these two.
Yeah.
And the problem's actually a little bit more, I would say, pernicious, because what happens now is that as you move data from, let's say you need to bring this data together, right? You have to worry about things like security, because if everything was in the enterprise, then the data integration problem was just moving from here to there. So not only do you need to move the data in a performant manner, because clearly the bandwidths are not the same, so that might be changing. The other thing is about compliance, because you may have some requirement that customer data can only be in a certain geography, and you don't know where the cloud data is, right?
Yeah.
So you may be in violation of some of those regulations that are out there. So it becomes even more challenging. So not only do you have to worry about security, you have to worry about other regulations as well.
Got it. Okay. We're running fairly short on time. One last question for you, which is, we've seen a lot of different use cases. I think Netflix talked about it yesterday and so forth, about streaming and Spark streaming and so forth. So as that starts to take off, how does the role of ETL in that world and data integration and governance change? Is it just the same? The data velocity is a little bit more? Is it a little bit different?
I think ETL, if you look back at what used to happen in ETL, right? Initially started with batch, but it actually started gradually moving to real-time as well. People didn't want to wait for a whole batch window before they could look at the layers data and warehouse. So active data warehousing was already in way, right? Now what people want to do is take some of that analytics and put that in the streaming. And what you don't want to do is reinvent the business logic you've done. So you'll actually see some of these some of the business logic that you apply in batch, you'll see that business logic moving as well. And that's why I see value of things like Spark, because you don't have to rewrite your business logic. You can leverage that.
Great. Well, I think we're unfortunately out of time.
All right.
So thank you again, Sanjay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.